Alrighty, everyone, we're going to go ahead and get started because we have quite the agenda today. My name is Riley Williams, and I am the Community Outreach Coordinator here at the CMTA. And I want to welcome you to our third quarter Lunch and Learn that we are titling Ink and Impact CMT Stories in Print. Stories of the lives of those with
That's
CMT from
disease.
the authors who lived it. So we like long titles around here, but we are very excited about this Lunch and Learn and thrilled that all of you are able to join us. Thank you so much for sharing your time today. And I want to thank our lovely guest speakers for giving up their time today to speak with all of us. Before we get started, I wanted to wish you all a very happy CMT Awareness Month. This month, as an organization, our goal is to allow our outside community to see CMT. I don't know if any of you have ever felt that CMT is misunderstood or unrecognized. And this month, as an organization, we are striving for CMT to be acknowledged, seen, understood, and recognized. So this Lunch and Learn came at such a fantastic time, and all of these wonderful CMT authors are doing just that. They're allowing for their CMT stories to be seen, understood, and recognized. So, without further ado, I would like to welcome our wonderful, wonderful CMT authors, Jonah Berger, Mary Wayman, Bethany Meloche, Don Johnson, Clark Semmes, Michael O'Neill, and Elizabeth Ouellette. Each one of these authors are going to share their personal journey with CMT, whether they have CMT or a connection to CMT. They're going to read a few pages of their book, and then they're going to let us know what inspired them to even put their story on paper. Before we get started, I wanted to go over a few housekeeping rules. I ask that everybody please mute themselves just so that we can be mindful of all of those attending the meeting and respectful of the guest speaker. If you have absolutely any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat, and we are going to try our very best to get to them towards the end. And this will be recorded. So if you happen to miss something along the way or want to hear the title of a book again or something along those lines, we're going to send out the recording at the end of the webinar. Alrighty, that is everything in my boring housekeeping rules. So I'm going to open up the floor to our first guest speaker, Jonah Berger.
Okay, thank you, Riley. I'm going to hit my start button so I stay within 10 minutes because I'm the first one and I'm not going to go over.
Wow, this is great.
Mark my words. Riley, you make boring housekeeping even interesting, so don't even worry about it, my friend. What a pleasure to be with you all today. I am Jonah Berger. If we haven't met yet, I am the National Youth Programs Manager for the CMTA and Camp Director for Camp Footprint for the CMTA. And loyal, figured this out the other day, 18 and a half year participant in the CMTA in all kinds of fashions. I was a volunteer for years, and then on the advisory board, and then part-time. Then I was camp director for Camp Footprint, and then full-time since February of 2020. And so I'm just so lifelong committed to this community and eternally honored to be a part of this community. Years ago, in around 2006 or 7, I was having dinner with a friend of mine who was asking me about my life with CMT. He was writing a paper for grad school, and I found that I was telling him this same similar set of stories that I told anyone who asked me about my life with CMT. And when I told him about that, I was like, dude, these stories I'm telling you, I tell them every time someone asks me. He said, you should write them down. And I'll never forget, I went to wash my hands in the bathroom before dinner, and I looked in the mirror and I was like, I should write them down. I'm a writer. Why not? So I went home that night and I made a list of all the topics and stories that I'd want to cover were I to write a book. They came out to about 14 or 15. And every time the spirit moved me over the next 7 to 9 months, I sat down, took the next topic, and started typing. And some of those topics took me about an hour to type. Some of those topics took me about 2 weeks to type. But when I was done, I had my book. He Walks Like a Cowboy by Jonah Berger, and this is me in Colorado. One man's journey through life with a disability. And basically, the long story short is that I always say that this is a great tool for someone who doesn't have CMT or doesn't have a physical disability to understand what it is we have and what it is we deal with. Basically, the long and the short of it. I have CMT1X. My mother also has CMT. I have cousins. I have a daughter now with CMT, and have for a very long time, as a result of my mother's attitude, been very proactive, very positive around my CMT. Not that I enjoy the act of going through every day with CMT. It sucks. That being said, I am a big believer in the attitude that you bring to it is the experience you'll have with it. And so in those days, and I have those days where I'm super negative, CMT feels super negative and feels really heavy. And in those days where I'm light and positive, CMT feels really positive. And so I strive. I don't always succeed, but I strive to be as positive as possible. That's the bottom line. And working with the youth of the CMTA, that's something I try to spread to them. That's something they are teaching me each and every day. Is not, again, to celebrate the act of having a disability, but to be positive about your life with it. It has taught me so much. It's brought me the finest people I could ever dream of calling friends. And so there's a lot of amazing gifts, not the least of which is being more empathetic to my fellow human beings that CMT has brought to me. And that's what I think this book is trying to cover. So I'm going to read you a short excerpt from this book. It's one of the chapters, but it's only 2 pages long, and it's called X-Ray Vision. So in we go. There is a certain mentality I have seen in those who deal with any kinds of struggle in life, a tool that is used to handle and deal with this struggle. It is the attempt and eventual success of trying to see the good in the struggle. One attempts to identify the pieces of or results of the struggle that are good, that are beneficial. Does it make the struggle disappear? No. Yet I have found that this mentality helps put the struggle into a better perspective, or at least a more palatable one. In regards to this philosophy, several positive results stand out. As a result of my disability, I am an inherently sensitive man. I have very little choice but to be concerned for the struggles of others because I have relied so much on their concern for mine. My disability has given me the desire to see others' struggles and to help to minimize them. I have learned to take my familiarity with pain and use it to empathize with others. My disability has taught me humility, at least in the physical sense. My pride in regards to my personality is best described as full-blown, but I have learned to appreciate strength through a perspective impossible to possess without a disability. I must say that one of my favorite silver linings is what I call X-ray vision. Throughout my life with a disability, I have noticed a wide variety of reactions towards me. Those that stare and don't say a word, those that stare and say a word, those who are comfortable when I actually bring it up, and those who are varying degrees of uncomfortable. Yet, the one common denominator that ties these various reactions together is that my disability allows me to see people's reactions. It allows me to see people's hearts. It allows me to see people's strengths and weaknesses in dealing with me. It allows me X-ray vision into one part of who they are. Once those around me become aware of my condition, be it stranger or friend, I am able to sense a bit of the character of that person, as if my disability were an instant X-ray into who they are. Enter Brant Lewis, my shining example of X-ray at work. In my later summers at Camp Ramblewood, where I grew up when I was about 17 or 18, and now a counselor for the camp, I met Brant Lewis. Brant was also a counselor at Ramblewood. He was from Arizona and a truly interesting guy. Brant was also a very good-looking guy and was very fully aware of this. As a result of being a good-looking guy, Brant was used to having his way with women. He was a player from start to finish. He was on his game all the time, and after a few summers at Ramblewood, Brant developed a reputation that was less than favorable. He was kind of a jerk. He rarely spoke with sincerity, and he rarely treated women, or men for that matter, with a great deal of respect. Brant was in it for Brant, or so it would seem. For whatever combination of reasons, I always got along with him. I liked Brant. He made me laugh, and I did the same in return. And I wasn't a woman, so he had very little reason to upset me. By the last summer that Brant and I were at camp together, he and I had talked a small bit about my disability. Nothing of substance, but it's fair to say that he was aware of my condition. Each night of camp, after the kids had gone to sleep, a quarter of the staff would stay back to look after them. That left three-quarters of the staff free to go out to the local bar and finish their evening. When the kids were asleep, those who were bar-bound would gather and walk up to the parking lot together. It was dark at this point, and to get to the parking lot, we had to walk up a tall hill and cross a small field. The trick with this journey was crossing the small field. It was no more than about 200 yards across, but it was made of uneven ground, filled with craters and dips, and to make it really interesting, was completely overgrown with tall grass, allowing no vision as to where the dips and holes were located. It was a disabled person's minefield. Let's just say that for a person with my condition, walking across that field in the dark was not my favorite thing to do. For the most part, I was still in the phase of my journey where I kept my fear and discomfort to myself. I didn't want to be seen as different. I would dread that. I would dread that field as it approached, and when the group would start walking across it, I would simply slow down a bit and take it at the most normal pace that my fear and feet could muster, except for the nights when Brant and I were both part of the barbound crew. On those nights, it looked something like this. The group of 25 staff would be walking across up the hill and laughing, and when we got to the edge of the field, the group would keep walking at their pace, barely noticing that they had entered the potholed field of doom. Except that Brant, each night that he was with the group, would always slow down a bit at the edge of the field and subtly position himself about 1 foot ahead of me. He would never look back or speak a word, but he just walked ahead of me with his hand held out behind him. This guy, this player who had little respect for women, a guy most people have written off as a total jerk, was the one member of the whole crew who never missed a chance to be my guide through that field. Most nights we would walk across just fine, but on certain nights I would stumble and Brant's hand was right there to grab. As a result of my disability, I was able to see a side of Brant, a side of his truest heart that most people would never have seen and probably wouldn't have thought existed. I was fortunate to have that vision of him. He is a good guy who made a lifelong impression on me. There have been countless others who have helped me in this way over the years, countless others who've lended me a hand or an ear without me having to ask for it. I use my x-ray vision in all of those moments to see into the true heart of people, and more times than not, I see only good things. So this is Brant. It's a little hard to see right there. There's cool Jonah with his sunglasses in summer camp. And I have 7 seconds left. So I just want to say thank you. And if you're interested, it's available on Amazon. I hope you enjoy the book.
Thank you so much, Jonah. I'm loving all the hearts that are coming in. This is really great, guys. I'm loving the fact that we're getting to share stories with one another. This is really wonderful. Next, I am going to welcome Bethany to share about her lovely CMT story in her book.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really honored to be here today, especially alongside these other wonderful authors. My name is Bethany Meloche. I'm American, but I live in England, in London specifically now with my husband and our 1.5-year-old son. I've been involved with the CMTA for 15 years as a volunteer, as a director, and now as an advisory board member. I make YouTube videos about living well with CMT. My most recent videos were on my pregnancy with CMT and also the challenges of taking care of a newborn baby when you have CMT and you have these hands. This weekend, I'm also launching my new podcast, Question Yourself. And my book, How Should a Body Be, was published in 2017. And How Should a Body Be is a memoir about my experiences growing up with CMT, wrestling with identity, and trying to live fully inside a body that doesn't always cooperate with you. Similar to Jonah, I wrote How Should a Body Be because I'd started sharing a lot of these stories at support group meetings and conferences and with friends. And I found they were really resonating with people. Because it turns out we share a lot more than a disease. A lot more. We share a lot of common experiences and stories. And I thought that there would be value in packaging them together in a book. And thankfully, many people have told me that they have found it valuable, not only because it makes them feel personally understood, but because they can just hand my book to someone and say, read this, right? Whether it's a new partner or an in-law, read this and you will understand me a little bit better. So I'd love to share an excerpt from my book. This passage comes from a chapter where I first was diagnosed with CMT type 1A. And at this point, I'm 12 years old, and I've just found myself in a neurologist's office at my own request, because 12-year-old Bethany had started getting lightning bolt pains down her arm, and so that led her down a Googling rabbit hole, and she discovered something called Charcot Marie Tooth Disease. And she felt very, very smart, even though the entire family already knew. But family secrets. A few weeks later, when my parents and I walked into the clinic, I was filled with excitement. I was ready to receive my diagnosis. And I felt fully confident that I would be getting an answer that very day, with scores of treatment options unfurling before me. And besides, lucky for the neurologist, I had already done all of the hard work for him. But even though I was sure I had figured out what was wrong with me, I wanted it made official. I wanted a piece of paper that said, "You have this." I wanted the validation that I'd been looking for the last 5 years, because those lightning bolts weren't the first thing to go wrong. And I'll get into those other things later. I wanted the certainty that yes, there was something going on inside me, that something was wrong and it had a name, and maybe even something that could help. A nurse led us into a large room with over a dozen lightly cushioned examination beds lining its perimeter, each beside a curtain attached to the ceiling that could be pulled around it for privacy. My head was immediately filled with the sounds of curtains whirring back and forth, murmured conversations, and of hurried steps of nurses and clinicians darting back and forth between patients. I heard the same phrase over and over again. "Hi there, I'm doctor. What brings you in today?" It doesn't always take an outwardly dramatic event for there to be a massive and meaningful shift in who you are and how you relate to your body. Sometimes it can be as simple as walking into a room. When you walk back out, you may not yet know that a change has taken place. But in time, you find yourself realizing that the person you were upon entering is fundamentally different than the person you left as. You start referring to yourself and who you are as pre-event and post-event, or pre-room and post-room. In my case, it was pre-diagnosis and post-diagnosis. When you look back on an unrelated event, you may think that was before. Now, when you meet a new friend, for example, you know that they will only ever know the you that is post-event, post-room, post-diagnosis. They will never know who you were before. You can never go back to the you that you were before. And then one day, years later, even you will come to forget who you were before. Susan Sontag writes about the kingdom of the ill, about the moment of crossing over. This room, this bed, these curtains, they were all part of my crossing. At 12 years old, I was ushered into my own kingdom of the neurologically diseased, a place so many of my ancestors before me had entered and left, forever changed. I'm guessing many of you on this call can relate to the conflicting emotions upon receiving a diagnosis of CMT. Because growing up, I knew I was different. I just didn't have the words for it. And when I was finally diagnosed, there was that feeling of relief in knowing what was happening. There was a power in that. But leaving that room at 12, there was already a fear and a grief in imagining what it would mean for my future. And I'll be honest, the concern was not misplaced. There have been a lot of challenges: embarrassing falls, isolation, chronic fatigue, dislocations, losing the ability to walk without support, losing the ability to walk at all, massive surgeries to rebuild some of what was lost. But there have also been turning points. Discovering I could still travel the world, still fall in love, still have a career, still become a mother. CMT has shaped my path in a big way, but it hasn't erased my ability to create meaning. And what I've learned is that sometimes the very thing that feels like it's holding us back the most is where we can discover the most growth. And although my body is predictable, my life doesn't have to be small. My book is available on Amazon. I want to thank you again to Riley and to the CMTA for inviting me here today. And if there's one thing I hope you take from my story, it's that your life is still wide open. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing, Bethany. I was telling Bethany a little bit earlier that when I was first diagnosed with CMT, she was the first person that I found, and I read her book, and I think it just established such a solid foundation for my CMT diagnosis. And Bethany writes in her book about how you can be empowered by your CMT and you can do absolutely anything. So she is just an amazing role model for everyone, but especially younger girls being raised in the CMT community. So thank you, Bethany, for joining us. Michael O'Neill, are you here?
Yes.
There you are.
Yes, I am. Here, hi.
Hi.
I didn't know I was going to be third.
No worries,
okay.
you got this.
Okay. So 10 minutes. That's not a long time for me because I'm very loquacious, especially when I'm talking about my favorite topic, me. Anyway, so I was diagnosed back in like 1968, 69. At that time, my doctor told me this is a very rare disease. You're probably one out of 250,000 that have it. So I bought that at the time. They did a surgery that they don't even do anymore. And but when I was first diagnosed, I was pretty upset. But I started thinking about this emotional stuff. I started thinking about the guys I went to school with. One was blind, a polio victim, deformities. A teacher had a deformed arm. I'm like, you know what? I consider myself still lucky. And so that only lasted, I think, that night. And then I started the positive vent. But yeah, growing up, I can relate to everybody, walking funny and people staring at my walk and me staring at them to catch them staring at me so I could give them a dirty look. And so went through all of that, and but still maintained a positive attitude. I was voted most friendly by my high school staff or class. And I was very honored by that because I didn't think I was that friendly of a guy. So as I continued to grow, and the disease was very slow developing with me, but I started backpacking, and I loved it. I just loved getting down the mountains. That was my church, and so I knew I needed to do that while I could because I would be limited with my ability. So for about 10 or 15 years, I really hit the mountains hard. And one of my favorite things, am I screen sharing now? One of my favorite things was caving because all you have to do is crawl. And but very challenging. In this particular picture, I look pretty trash because I got stuck in that cave. And so my buddy pulled me out, went back to that cave, and then fell into a lake room and I almost drowned. So that cave tried to kill me at least twice, but just was fascinated with caving. And to get to the caves, you had to do a lot of backpacking. These were far into the mountains. And so hiking was a challenge because, you know, especially going downhill, how we step, our ankle turns in, and I'd roll my ankle out frequently. Most times I could catch myself do a couple stumble steps along the way and stay upright. But a buddy of mine is hiking behind me one time. I roll my ankle, do my steps, keep going. He goes, didn't that hurt? I said, no, everything's so stretched out down there. It really doesn't cause me a lot of pain. He goes, my ankle would have snapped in half. I go, yeah, I know. I'm so lucky. Anyway, so guys like that I hiked with, though, just like Jonah's experience, they didn't placate me. They didn't baby me, but they were always there for me. But I grew up, going back a little bit, I kind of became a smart aleck when it came to my condition. I still went out for athletics, even though I sucked because I was uncoordinated and slow. So I'm getting on the track bus one time coming home, and one of my buddies sat at the back of the bus, and please don't take this racially, but all the black guys sat at the back of the bus. I don't know why that is. So I'm walking back there to sit with Lester, and I passed Gerald Thomas, who ended up becoming a pro football player. The guy was gigantic, and he was a nice guy, but just this big monster. And as I'm walking by him on the bus, he goes, hey, O'Neill, he says, you walk funny. I said, Gerald, I'd rather walk like me than look like you. I went, oh, he's going to snap me in half. Oh, why did I say that? All of these guys at the back of the bus just cracked up. So he was left defenseless. He couldn't do anything. They were just laughing. I sat down next to Lester, and Lester goes, what were you thinking? I go, I wasn't thinking. Oh, my God. It was just a crack up. And then, let me see. So going up to a place like this, that is well above timberline in the mountains. So we're above 10,000 feet here. And I just loved getting up there. And like my father-in-law hiked with me one time, stepfather-in-law, he says, you know what? He says, you're like a goat going up. He says, but you're like a boulder coming down. I know. Believe me, I know. But getting like to a place like that was just gratifying, you know, to know that I'd made it up there and loved it. Something else I did, here's a couple other, these are the guys who were very supportive of me. This is the guy in between me and the guy in front of the left picture. He was my main caving guy. He was a MacGyver in the caves. He could take a potato and make a radio out of it. And so really good guys to hike with because they were very supportive. They knew their stuff and they never babied me, like I say. And I was able to hang with them, at least going up. Coming down, I was a little bit slower. There's the Flintstone bench. You'll read about these things in my book, about the specifics of these trails. Whitewater rafting was another activity that I really enjoyed. I did enough of that at one point to where I guided for a while up here in Washington. A lady recruited me, and then I also did some skydiving. I found out that I like things that involve sitting, falling, and crawling because I'm very good at all three of those things. So whitewater rafting was another favorite. So rather than excerpts, I'll tell you a couple stories. But I end my book, you know, it's not what life gives you, it's what you do with it. And so throughout my life, it was making, I don't believe in luck. I believe you make your own luck. You know, you choose your paths. I wrote this. My caving buddy said, you got to write down our stories, going back to how Jonah got started, because I've written a couple other books too. And I said, that's a great idea. Well, instead of just writing about our tales of caving and backpacking, I keyed on the CMT aspect and those challenges, like all of us, and how to live with that and the support we got and it not letting us stop us. You know, it's not a wall that's in front of us. It's a couple of hurdles and we get past it. And we are inspirational for people without meaning to be. I heard about people coming to me later and they've told me what an inspiration it was. And it always surprised me. I'm like, what are you talking about? And so that was always gratifying. I think I've got 10 seconds left. Oh, I got 2 minutes. Okay. So as I wrote, I wanted this book, my book, to be a motivation for anybody who has any kind of physical limitation, and I'm always amazed at the positive attitudes, just like you folk, who maintain a more positive attitude, I think, than people who have what we call a normal life or a normal existence. I've known wheelchair victims, people who have a myriad of physical problems, and they always seem to possess an attitude that is well beyond the norm. And I remember somebody said, "Oh, your attitude is exceptional." I said, "I don't see that. I've known people who are have these challenges, and they're always positive." So I think we do that as a self-defense, and a self-motivation, and that ends up good stuff. Bethany was talking about how it's impacted her life. It certainly has impacted mine in mostly positive ways. And like Jonah said, there are days I'm like, it makes me so mad because I go to pick something up and I can't. The son of a, I've become a very good cusser in my older age. And then I think in terms of, well, how much of this is CMT and how much of this is age? So I talk to my buddies who have heart issues. They can't hear, all these physical problems they had, they've caught up. Now we would all be the last guy picked for the flag football team. And so it tickles me because I realize, wow, I'm not so different now because of age. And these guys, we sit around, my friends have always been my therapy. It's always been fun to talk about the things we've done. And now it's commiserating. Well, what's your health issue these days? And so I know that's really nothing to laugh about, but we do. Anyway, rather than the expert, I've told you a couple stories. Another book that I've written is The Last Goal. And this is the protagonist in this book questions death. He's come to have some near-death experiences, dealing with death, and once again, an appreciation for life. We're so committed to living a long time, but when you consider all the people on the planet and what they face, starvation, warfare, childhood mortality rates are off the charts, we live a very, very blessed existence. So the two books kind of go together. And like everybody else, they're on Amazon, and we don't make any money off of these books, but it sure is fun to see those sales. It sure is fun to say, because I look at it every day. It's like, oh, somebody bought my book because it just moved up 2 million places on the Amazon chart, which makes no sense. But at least there's a sale there. And as maybe some of you are doing too, I get to a point where I've sold so many, and then I donate some of my proceeds back to CMT. I'm more than happy to do that. And thank you guys so much. Riley, especially, thank you. Here I go.
Thank you so much, Mike. Thank you for being vulnerable and sharing your story with us. I think that a lot of us on this call can relate to you. So I just want to thank you for sharing your adventures too. I'm excited to read your book, and it looks like you've had some really great friends, and that's really wonderful. So a really great support system. But again, thank you for being vulnerable and sharing with us. It's really great to have you. Alrighty, next we are going to welcome Elizabeth, and she played a vital role in helping the CMTA publish the next book that she is going to showcase. So, Elizabeth, whenever you're ready.
I am ready. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So Elizabeth Ouellette, whoops. I was involved with the CMT over 20 years as a volunteer, as a board member, as a lot of things. And I did a lot of writing, and I love to write, and I love to share my experiences with CMT. I got involved initially with the CMTA because my son, Johan, was diagnosed at age 7 with CMT. And it was a short journey compared to a lot of you of getting him diagnosed. But once he was diagnosed, it was interesting. We're like, should we tell him? Should we not tell him? And having grown up in a family of secrets, and I go back to what Bethany said about family secrets, I have no family secrets. I think growing up with secrets, you don't tend to have secrets as you become an adult. People are saying, don't tell him, it's going to crush him. He's not, he has CMT, who knows? And we turned that around to actually embrace Johan and his CMT, tell him he had this disease. And decided to live the best we could in the moment. So we took him out of school for some trips. We traveled all around. We're very fortunate enough to do things like that. One thing for him was that at school, he didn't have the words to say, I have CMT and what is it? I mean, if I ask you today, what is CMT? Well, it's a, neurological disease that's progressive, it is inherited, and 7-year-old kids don't have that vocabulary, right? So I kind of created a school program so that I could go in and have this really fun program. And so Johan would sit there and be involved so the other kids could empathize with him. And so that was a great program. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that when I read my excerpt from this book. So that's how I got involved with the CMTA. And this book was not only done by me, it was really a book by the CMTA community. I did not write this book. I took people's stories, including my own, Bethany's, Jonah's, Glenn Pfeffer, and so many people have written, Gina Sweeney have written in this book to give tips about CMT, how to live with CMT. And this book is available on Kindle, also on Amazon. It's not on Kindle, but the Kindle app. And it's called 101 Practical Tips for Dealing with CMT. Marcia Semmes, Clark Semmes, and myself reached out to the community, and we got all this information and put it into a book available for people looking on tips to live with CMT. And we did everything from exercise, PT, OT, to surgery with Dr. Glenn Pfeffer, said like see a therapist, see a occupational therapist, just so many topics we covered, right? How to tell your children, how to grow up with CMT, how to deal with pain, how to do this, how to do that. So it was a really fun book to write and to gather, but it was really thanks to the CMTA community to have put this together. And I want to say that this book comes out of my love of not telling secrets. I love CMT Awareness Month, the theme this year. CMT is not invisible because it's rare. It's invisible because no one talks about it. And I have done the opposite my entire life. And so has Johan and my husband, Sheila, who is also involved with the CMTA. Okay, so let me just read you just the school program that I'm very proud of. And it was really a lot of fun if I can figure out how to get to my desktop now. So hold on just a second. No, I don't want to leave. Okay, here we go. And I'm sorry, I don't have the original book with me. I'm unfortunately in Vermont right now, which I didn't plan to be. So if you go on Amazon, you can see the book. And I was tip 66. I wrote several tips, one about surgery, because I wrote also a blog when Johan had surgery because it failed the first time. We had to do it again. The ins and outs. It's really pre and post surgery I talked about, and that can be found in my blog, Best Foot Forward. So tip 66, teach your child's classmates about CMT. Why does Johan have funny shoes? Why can't he run fast and climb trees? And how come he gets tired so easily? These are just some of the questions my son's grade school classmates asked, leading me to come up with a class exercise to give them a sense of what it was like to have CMT. So that day I spent several minutes explaining the meaning and origin of CMT. And then we talked about the peripheral nervous system and the difference between sensory and motor nerves, and to demonstrate how difficult everyday activities can be for someone with CMT. I gave each student a shirt with buttons and a pair of socks that they wore on their hands. And I had them put these socks on their hands and asked them to button their shirts as fast as they could. Like, let's go, the bus is coming, you got to button those shirts up, let's go. And of course, it's very, very challenging to button up shirts with CMT, and it's very challenging to button up shirts with socks on your hands. And I heard, this is hard, I can't do this, I give up. So this exercise led to a wonderful discussion about the frustrations of writing, tying shoelaces, and buttoning shirts for people with CMT. So it's giving them those experiences, saying, oh, you know, he might need a little bit more time. Next, I used a model of a 10-foot long myelin sheath made with black hose for nerves. And they all had different wires, different colored wires sticking out on both ends to show how the myelin sheath protects the nerves and helps them conduct impulses to and from the brain. I explained that the myelin sheath in people with CMT is thinner and thus less able to protect and conduct. I asked 3 volunteers first to run the length of the sheath 4 times and then to hop the same distance. They all agreed that hopping was harder and more time consuming, illustrating why muscles in people with CMT get tired more quickly, of course, right? Finally, I divided the class into groups of 4 students and gave each group, except my son's group, a bottle full of glue. My son's group received a glue bottle filled with water. I said that the first group to squeeze out the glue from the bottle would be the winner. Of course, the group with the water in the bottle won very quickly. And cries of unfairness and injustice rang loudly throughout the room, especially when I handed out the bags of candy to just 5 members of a class of 21. One child blurted out, "Oh, I get it. We all have CMT." And despite all our efforts, the non-CMT group won the prize. I saw light bulbs illuminating the entire room. This exercise produced a deeper acceptance of my son and a more profound acceptance and understanding of CMT. That's that one. So thank you for listening. And so please talk about CMT. Talk about it. It's nothing to be embarrassed about. It's something we need to share. Everyone is on the spectrum of differences. Everybody can do things better or worse than other people. And it doesn't matter. Go forth, talk about it. And it's part of life, right? And the last thing I want to say is, as a mom, I did all I could to give my son the experiences that helped him grow and expand and live life to the fullest. But I couldn't have done it without my husband because I was very anxious and so afraid of him falling, afraid of him doing this. Where my husband's Gilles was more, let's go try skiing, let's go try to bike. And biking at 25 years old with the Cycle for CMT, that has given him so much self-confidence and muscles and just exuberance for life because he can go further, farther, faster. And I don't worry about him going out. He loves biking. And it just changed his world. So all those activities they did without fear and anxiety of me being around, right? And today my anxiety is lower because I know he can handle what he has to handle in life because he had a good foundation. And his involvement with CMT was just a really great experience. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. It's so great to have you join us. You have impacted the CMTA in more ways than you even know. So it's really great to have you. And I did the sock challenge with my family that doesn't have CMT, and there were a few cuss words thrown around and they hated it. And I was like, you see, this is my life. So I love it. And I think that anybody's family members that don't have CMT, you should make them do the challenge. It's pretty funny. Next, we are going to welcome Dawn to share a little bit about her story. Oh, you're muted. 1 second. There you go.
I think. There. Okay.
Yep, we can hear you.
I just want to say thank you for having me. This is my very first dealing with CMTA in a Zoom meeting. I have been an advocate with just on my own through my book. I have been an advocate I've done book signings, which were a flop, but I got information out there. There weren't many books that went out that day, but they did take them at the bookstores. I have some locally around the bookstores here, so I'm proud of that. Many of you will probably notice that my head is shaking a lot, and that is not because I'm nervous. It's strictly the tremors of my wonderful CMT that comes along with some of the disease. Like many of you have said, 2 or 3 have said the sock challenge. I have to say, I do have a Facebook page, Dawn Johnson, author, and I recorded some of my family members doing that, trying to get lids off with socks on their hands and trying to pick stuff up with socks on their hands. And you're welcome to check my Facebook page out, and you can see different videos all through there, as well as stuff about my book. My book is Living with CMT. It's our journey with me and my son, going through it. It basically, like a lot of you, in childhood, I was very, very clumsy, and always wondering why I was tripping, why I was falling, why this was happening, why I couldn't compete in gym class, and why were things so hard. And it didn't really dawn on anything with my parents, I guess because they saw me every day. So as you will read in a minute, and you'll hear about my journey with how I was brought to the neurologist, and no other, the podiatrist, my regular doctor, oh, she's just clumsy, she'll get over it, she'll grow out of it. Well, I never did. So then I ended up at a neurologist, wondering what I was doing there. I was only 11 years old at the time, and I did not fully understand what was wrong with me. So here the doctor was the first one to say, okay, we need to do some more tests. There's something else going on, and I'm not really sure what it is. Now, when my son was diagnosed, he only had to get a blood test. But going back to when I was diagnosed, I was in the hospital for a week, going through test after test after test. And finally, by the end of that week, the doctor took us aside and said, you have CMT. And at that time, it was still considered a form of muscular dystrophy where they weren't split up yet between the two. Later on, of course, they were. But when I first found this out, I thought, well, what does this mean for me? What should I expect from my life? And I was a very active person. Even though I was clumsy, I wanted to be active. I was an avid horse rider. I rode, I competed, I wanted to do everything horses. I loved horses. And really, I still do to this day, but right now, I've lost my horses. Unfortunately, they passed, and it's hard to find a good horse that can deal with your disease. It has to be trained right, and I don't have that capability anymore, unfortunately. So anyways, back to the story. When my dad was in denial the whole time. He never really wanted to admit that I had CMT. He thought that, I guess he thought that the doctor was lying. He never really told me why. And then my mom, she was very compassionate, very wanting to help me whenever she could, taking me to meetings. We started the CMT meetings all the way back then, went to sport groups. And the doctors, of course, I don't know about anybody else, but they're like, swim, swim, swim. You need to really swim. Get in the pool, do what you can. But me, I found horses to be therapeutic, very therapeutic, because the outside of a horse is good for the inside of man, is what they tend to say during therapy lessons. Because later on in life, I taught therapy lessons. I taught English, Western, anything people wanted to learn. If I didn't know about it, I would learn about it. I said, I'm going to do this and I'm going to get through it no matter what it takes. And it came down to the point of me just teaching from what they call a club card. So I could sit during most of the lesson. And when I had to get up, I normally had help in the arena with me. I got volunteers, I trained them. I did what I had to make my dreams come through, even though I had CMT and I struggled with that. And when I had my child, I thought the same way. I thought, I'm not going to hold them back. I'm not going to prevent him from doing anything that he may want to do in his life. Now, unfortunately, he was supposed to write the book with me, but I lost him before we even got done with the book. So the chapters on him were supposed to be from his perspective, but I kind of wrote them since I was the one mainly to help him. And he went through the same bullying, same just about everything I went through in my childhood, he went through. And that is why I wanted it from the perspective of both of us. So there are men and women, young and old, that will go through this. It doesn't matter what age you are. You just need to be willing to explain to the people, because I told my son, I said, he started getting tremors in his hands. And people at school were wondering why he couldn't eat lunch without getting the spoon to his mouth solidly. And he was very distraught by that. And it made me hurt for him. But I just told him, I said, look, all you have to do is explain to them. And if they don't understand, then, at least you have given them the knowledge that they need to know. So, with all that said, I am going to turn it over to Riley, and she is going to read an excerpt from my book.
Absolutely. Alrighty, here we go. So it says, fast forward to the Thanksgiving holiday of 2018, when my aunt, mother, and I reminisced about those early years. During our conversation, my aunt recalled the faithful summer when I came off the plane around the age of 9 or 10, and she noticed something was definitely wrong. She could not believe her eyes and thought I had been crippled, but she didn't mention it to me at the time. Now, as an adult, I listened as she shared her reaction. It just made me want to cry. I couldn't imagine what I looked like. It wasn't just about curly toes. She suspected something neurological. Honestly, at that point, I still thought I've moved around normally and didn't feel self-conscious, for I didn't know any better. As a kid, I just thought I was clumsy. No big deal, right? My aunt called my mom to question her about it. My mom told her she didn't notice anything except that I was tripping more. My aunt agreed that tripping was a problem and she thought I should see a doctor to have this checked out. Hold on, I lost my spot. Here we go. Okay, she then contacted her friend, a neurologist, to see if she could come out and observe my walking and examine my feet. My aunt and I went swimming with the neurologist one day. Although I had no idea that our visitor was a doctor of any kind, I just thought it was nice to have another person to swim with. After observing me in and out of the pool, she asked me to sit on the edge. She wanted to see if I had any ability at all to lift my toes, and of course I couldn't. She then told my aunt it was definitely something neurological and that I should have this checked out by a specialist. Apparently, my aunt then told my dad about all of this, and he refused to think anything was wrong with me. Everything is fine, he said, in denial. I'm guessing and not wanting to believe that there's anything wrong with my child. Send her back home. My aunt refused because it was way too early in the summer. Instead, she dropped the subject with my dad and began talking to my mom any chance she had. Apparently, a lot of things were going on with my feet and the ability to walk, and neither one of my parents saw it. I guess since they lived with me day to day, they just didn't notice. Mom finally agreed to make an appointment for me before school started. That meant I had to leave Texas a little bit earlier than usual, but my aunt was truly concerned and wanted me to be seen by a professional.
Thank you for
Yes.
reading that. Yeah, so originally I was from Maryland and New Jersey, and that's why they said I had to go back to get back home from Texas, because they wanted me seen there and they didn't want me to see the neurologist. But again, it brings up how my parents didn't even notice. So why should I have let everyone else just go through life wondering, what is it? What is it that's wrong with me? So, like many of you out there that I've heard so far, I wrote the book for the same reason. I wanted people to know. I wanted to advocate for the disease. I wanted people to know what CMT was and how it affects people. So, anyways, that's my story, and I thank you for having me on here, and I enjoyed it very much.
Thank you for joining us, and I'm glad that you're a part of the CMTA. You shared so many wonderful ways to adapt and all about perspective. And I can honestly say I've never been swimming with a neurologist, and I think that that's pretty cool. So it's really awesome to meet you, and thank you for joining us. Next, we are
Welcome. Thank
going to
you.
welcome, yeah, absolutely. Next, we're going to welcome Mary.
Hey everyone, I'm Mary Wayman. I have CMT type 1A. The majority of my family has it. Normally it's easier to list off who doesn't have it, frankly. I have gone to Camp Footprint for 9 years now. This was the first year I missed it and never again. I am one of the original campers though. There's very few of us left, however. Growing up, I got diagnosed when I was about like 2 years old, so I knew early on. It was just my whole life I had something to point at, which pros and cons with that. If I felt I could go, oh, it's just my CMT, but also I would have a bad day and I'd go, I have CMT, I don't have to do anything. So there were a few years where it kind of just took over. Every one of my families had their moments like that, unfortunately. My sister, who I was very close with growing up because she's relatively close in age, she does not have it. So we'd always get lumped together in school. So I would try and keep up with her and keep up with her friends, and I'd try and hide my CMT so I wouldn't be different. So Camp Footprint to me really was like a coming out almost of, this is me. I have CMT. I am different. I'm not my sister. I don't have to not have CMT. And yes, I fall sometimes, and that's okay. I have Walk a Mile in My Braces, which is a book from 70 something campers, I believe. Don't quote me on how many people actually wrote in this, where we all just answered questions about how it was to live with CMT in a day-to-day life, basically. And I personally filled out my answers with this more so to become me and to go, I have CMT, I am in a book with CMT, this is me, rather than trying to get it out there that CMT is a thing, because obviously everyone in this book has it. We all know about it. But this was me lumping myself into the group, into the family, basically. So I have a few little entries that I did want to read for you guys. This first one, I believe the question was, what advice would you give to someone who is newly diagnosed? I said to reach out. Talk to whoever you need. It doesn't matter if it's just a stranger with CMT on social media or a family member. Let them know what you're going through and how you feel. We're all in this together. And I stand by that wholeheartedly. So many times I will see like Riley or someone post on Instagram, and I know that they are a safe space. And so many times I see people with their surgeries or with their braces. And I was never one. I did not like showing off my braces. I did not like it if I fell in public. I guess I'm never seeing those people again because I can't face them anymore. So whenever I see you guys post on social media, it gives me the confidence as well. And I've posted about my CMT a few times now too. And I would not have done that without the encouragement from everyone else doing it as well. And then it also gives you an opportunity to ask questions, to kind of get an insider point of view. Because I personally haven't had surgery yet. I got to see so many people that did get their surgery. So when I had to think about it, I could go and I could ask. And I wasn't just going into it blind, which is much more than many people get. This next one, I believe the question was, have you gone to Camp Footprint? I said, I have been to Camp Footprint. It's been super special to me because I've gotten to meet people who are also positive all the time, despite their CMT. They've helped teach me that it's okay to be disabled and it doesn't change who I am. Talking to people who knows what I'm going through, even when we just talk about movies, it feels like we have a closer connection because we know that the other one probably has braces on or anything like that. Specifically, whenever I was at camp, we would talk about God knows what, but it would always be while we're strapping up our braces to go out in the morning or putting on a knee brace to go swimming. There's so many braces that we put on the whole week, but you could just talk about anything and you don't have to worry about, oh, I gotta hide my braces. I have to wait to talk to people until my braces are on in my room and then I can come out. We would all just sit there and we'd all brace up at the same time. And I never had that anywhere else. And there's a lot of braces there. And then this last one, I will say when I filled this out, I was 15 years old. And I was a little edgy. I thought I was being very quirky. But the question is, if you were to write a story about your life with CMT, what would the title be? And I said, I'm not dead yet. And well, yes, that is very edgy of me to say. I do still stand by that because I think about it a lot when I have a problem with my knee or if I start limping when I walk sometimes. I sit there and I go, but I'm not dead. Yes, I might walk funky. Yes, I might roll my ankle. I might fall. I'm not dead. I'm still here. I'm still around. We're all still here. And there's no going downhill anymore. It's just up. There's only getting better. So we're just going to work at it. And mine was pretty quick and easy, but that's all I have for you guys.
Thank you so much, Mary. I am thrilled to hear that you will forever be coming back to Camp Footprint. You were deeply missed, and everyone in the comments were saying that you look like Taylor Swift. So I
get that a lot.
I just wanted to tell you that. But thank you for sharing your story, and I just adore you. You are the greatest. So I'm so glad that you could join us today. Alrighty, so Clark Semmes was going to join us today, but unfortunately he had a family emergency. So we are going to go ahead and move on to Jonah Berger again. But before I do, I just want to let you know that I have dropped in the chat where you can purchase all of these books, and I am going to share again, just in case that you have heard one today that you want to read more about. Go ahead, Jonah Berger.
Okay, thank you. I just want to say I am co-chair of the Mary Wayman celebration group because I just think the world of you, dude. You're awesome. You're awesome. I remember when I first read I'm Not Dead Yet. I remember it because I was like, wow, there you go. Well done. Well done. So I'm gonna read a quick excerpt from my second book, which I wrote Years after the first book, I think in the neighborhood of 2019, 2020. These are stories from my life that I believe prove that something bigger is going on than us. I never try to define it more than that. Some people are comfortable calling it God. Some people are calling it fate. I call it the magic of life. But this book is filled with stories that encapsulate my journey through the magic of this life. And I'm really proud of this book because in a time where it's so easy to think about the negative side of the world we live in, there's just some really beautiful parts of this world we live in that the more you focus on that, same as I was saying before about my other book, the easier it becomes to live your life in that space as opposed to the opposite. So this book is called The Strangest of Places. And yeah, I love it. And it's a direct quote from a Grateful Dead song. Once in a while, you get shown the light in the strangest of places if you look at them right. So, how you look at things is what you'll end up seeing, is my 2 cents. So, let us read a little excerpt from chapter 20, The Italian Pizza Cutter. I had no idea early on where my travels would take me. How far and wide would I go and who would I meet? I knew the idea of travel interested me, but didn't yet comprehend the chutzpah it would take to get out into it. I did, thank God, develop said chutzpah. I came to know friends who expanded my mind and confidence past the confines of my own fear. They had traveled and told stories that dazzled me and thus planted the seed of wanderlust that has been growing ever since. I started with the United States and have seen a good bit of these states so far. Then up to Canada, where I saw some really beautiful, serene places and people. Thanks to my friends Dave and Sarah getting married in Sayulita, Mexico, I finally made it down to Latin America and found a piece of my very soul there. What interests me in my travels around the world is how when I first meet people, all I can see is our difference. All you can focus on are the things that are not the same. How you look, what you eat, how you dress, the words you are speaking. And yet, once you come to know someone, once you really come to know someone, then all I can focus on is how we are the same, is the similarities that we carry through this life of ours. And to know one another is far easier than you would think, as evidenced by the time I went on my 3-week trek to Europe. I bought a Euro pass, packed my backpack, and went for it, traveling from Spain to France to Amsterdam to Germany to Italy. I met amazing people on my travels, one of which was the waitress at a cafe in Cinque Terre, Italy. I sat down and ordered a Coke and a pizza. The pizza came, as it did across Italy, in personal size and uncut. It had become completely clear that my waitress spoke no English, and I was armed with a vast knowledge of Italian that allowed me to say hello, goodbye, thank you, and princess. Once she placed the pizza in front of me, I reached for my fork and knife and began the process of cutting my meal. As a result of my disability, the style and effectiveness of my cutting technique is far from normal and only mildly effective. After about a minute of this, my waitress came by and without saying a word, picked up my plate and took it away. I sat hungry and wondering what strange custom I was encountering. 3 minutes went by. I was a little annoyed by not having a clue why she took my food away. And she returned a moment later and placed my pizza back in front of me. I looked down and saw that my pizza was completely cut into bite-sized pieces. My heart melted and my smile widened. This woman, this total stranger with whom I could not hold any conversation, had noticed my struggle and taken it upon herself to help out, without request or apology. She simply saw a fellow human being that needed some help, and she gave it. Grazie, principessa. And this is what brings me back to the wonderful world of travel and what I have learned from the people and places of this world. It is true, the Italians are boisterous, the Germans are stern, and the French are a bit rude. But as soon as I showed I wasn't going to be that typical American complaining about the lack of Heinz ketchup on the table, As soon as I spoke at least a few words in the native tongue and showed that I was trying to assimilate, I was greeted with absolute kindness and fellowship. The value in travel is seeing new places, but my favorite part of travel is meeting new people. The more I meet, the better I feel about the world. And there's just something perfect about that story in that it's kind of feeding off what Elizabeth was saying. I struggled not to unmute myself and say, yeah, Elizabeth, because whenever someone talks about sharing the story of CMT with others, it's speaking my language. And I do not minimize how challenging it is to share our CMT with others. I don't. It's challenging. I do it very easily, and it still challenges me, believe it or not. But I do believe with absolute certainty that it is so important to practice and to up your skills with sharing your CMT with others. Number one, how's anyone going to understand you or empathize with you or support you if they don't understand what you're going through? So I'm a big believer in sharing our challenges with one another. You learn about each other through that, and you get better support from those around you, strangers and friends alike. And so if there is a theme about this book and my first book, it is open up. Hard as it may be, against your instincts as it may be, open up and share your story with others, because as a result of having CMT, whether you have it in you to write a book or not, you have things to teach other people. And don't ever forget that. You're a teacher waiting to happen. You just have to teach. That's all. And the lucky thing for me is twice now in my life, I have focused, which is hard for me, and sat down and got my thoughts and feelings out onto paper, onto the screen. And I'm incredibly thankful for that, because now whenever I meet someone new in my life, I say, here. When I first started dating my wife, Megan, I said, here. And this was a tool I could put in her hand or anyone's hand that will help them understand not only CMT, but my journey with it. So that's it for my second book. Thanks for listening, y'all.
Thank you, Jonah. I said that we would get to some questions in the chat, and I know that we have answered some of them as our webinar has gone through, but one of the questions is for you, Jonah. Hannah asked, how did you feel when you found out your daughter had CMT?
Very good question. So I have CMT 1X. And so for me, and I knew this going in, for women like my mother who have 1X, it's on one of their two X chromosomes. So it's a 50-50 chance with every kid. My mom had my sister, gave her unaffected X. My sister doesn't have CMT. My mom had me, gave the affected X. I have CMT, but there was no way to know in advance. But with men who have 1X, like myself and my cousin, it's on our X chromosome, and men have an X and a Y. And so every daughter I have, I'll have given my X chromosome, and she will have CMT. Any son I have, like my younger one, Arthur, I'll have given my Y, and he will not have CMT. I guess going into it, I thought, and I still do, I would never decide not to have kids based on the struggle of life with CMT, because, again, hard as it can be, my life is richer as a result of my CMT. There's just no two ways about it. I wouldn't be here talking to you. I wouldn't call you all my friends if it weren't for CMT, and I'm eternally grateful. That being said, it is a sincere challenge. And once she was actually born, we didn't know what we were having in advance. Once she came out, we were like, it's a girl. She's got CMT. I will vastly admit that it is weighing heavy on my heart. I have worked with a lot of other people's kids in my career and given them coaching about owning your challenges and walking forth proudly, even if you're stumbling. And yet when it comes to your own child, it is a bit of a different story. I plan to, and I know I will succeed at doing the same thing with my daughter that I do with the kids I work with. I guess what I'm saying, my long-winded answer to your question, is that it's been harder than I expected. She doesn't show any big symptoms, but I can tell by looking at her hands and feet that it's there. And I just love her with every fiber of my being. So it is hard to know that she will struggle. But this is the next chapter of my journey with CMT, is to walk next to her on hers and help her see the same truth that I've come to see. So thanks for asking.
Thank you for sharing, Jonah. I saw that we had a lot of questions in the chat regarding research and what's going on in the CMTA and with our STAR program and our research program. And I just wanted to let all of you know that our fourth quarter Lunch and Learn is going to be focused on CMT research, clinical trials, and STAR. So I want all of you to please mark the calendar and keep that in mind. It's going to be towards one of the first weeks of December. We will announce the official date very soon, but I just wanted to let all of you know as I'm going through the chat. I don't think I missed any questions, but before we end, I just wanted to go ahead and share the link again to where you can find all of these authors' books and more. I wanted to mention that we had several authors wanting to join in this session, so I'm hoping that we can do another one. There are Clark Semmes' book is in there, and so is Brooke Shapiro's book, and she wrote CMT and Me, and it is about CMT and how to explain CMT to her son. So it is a really great story, especially if you're trying to explain CMT to a little one, just like Jonah was talking about. So I wanted to share that with you as well. And just thank you all so much for your time and sharing your lunch time with us or your early morning, wherever you are located. And I wanted to thank all of our guest speakers for sharing their story. I know that I saw in the chat, everyone was relating to each other's story and encouraging one another. So I want to thank you all for being vulnerable. And I just really, really appreciate it. And we learned so much through storytelling. So thank you all for being here. And I hope that you have a fantastic rest of your day.
Great job, Riley.
Thanks, everybody.
Riley, thanks everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a great day, everyone.